It is absolutely breathtaking, the speed and swiftness and strength of these sanctions against the oligarchs.
This time around, the effort to track down their assets is much greater.
We're joining with European allies to find and seize their yachts, their luxury apartments, their private jets. We're coming for your ill-begotten gains.
I mean, it's an incredible move. We're chasing down yachts in the ocean. It's like a movie being played out in front of us.
I think there's a whole bunch of places where more sanctions need to be imposed.
It's not as if there's a document in a vault somewhere that says the owner of asset X is, Vladimir Putin, and he's signed on the bottom line and just don't tell anyone. It's complicated.
This is just something absolutely unprecedented in the history of wealth, let alone oligarchs. The oligarchs are critical to understanding Vladimir Putin and today's Russia. They were born out of the chaos of the fall of the Soviet Union and its transition from communism to capitalism.
An oligarchy is, in technical terms, rule of an organization or a country by a small number, typically wealthy individuals. And that term really stuck in Russia in the 1990s.
Effectively, the government took companies that had previously been state companies, privatized them, and then tried to finance those privatizations and their ongoing businesses thereafter by finding favored investors and creating deals in which the government managed to turn over ownership to these individuals for what was seen as an attractive price.
If you look at Roman Abramovich and his partner, they bought an oil company in the mid-1990s called Sibneft for about $200 million. They later sold it back to the government for $12 billion.
This group of kind of 1990s oligarchs, Piotr Avin and Mikhail Friedman at Alfa Bank, they're much more integrated with the West. For example, Vladimir Putin was on the board of the Kennedy Center in Washington.
They were really the kings of Russia. After the elections in the mid-1990s when Boris Yeltsin was reelected, and then when Yeltsin became ill in the late 1990s, it was the oligarchs who chose Vladimir Putin.
When Putin came to power in 2000, most people thought that he would have difficulty taming the oligarchs and the powerful regional governors in Russia. This is somebody who did not have a big public profile, who had never run for office, was uncomfortable speaking before crowds.
Over time, Vladimir Putin said to them, first, if any of you meddle in politics, I will come after you. And sure enough, those who criticized Putin or the oligarchs who meddled in politics were mysteriously found hanging in their bathrooms, strangled with a dog leash, or in some cases poisoned.
There's also a whole generation of oligarchs who grew up in the Putin era, who control state assets and who grew fantastically wealthy off of state contracts or by running large state companies.
Obviously, Putin's background was in the Russian intelligence, KGB, and then FSB. Those who were colleagues, peers, or friends, or in some cases, literally childhood friends of Putin, ended up forming the basis of the next circle of oligarchs. They ended up benefiting from their relationships with Putin.
The United States first started targeting the oligarchs in 2014 when Russia invaded Crimea. It didn't work for two main reasons. Number one, the oligarchs had a very easy way of avoiding sanctions. They simply transferred their assets to their family members or friends. The second reason it didn't work is that the United States discovered that the oligarchs had no influence on Putin. In fact, the power flowed completely in one direction. What the Justice Department did this time is to create a special global task force to coordinate with countries in Europe and around the world to find these assets to seize these assets. And eventually, if they can prove a crime, they will actually seize them and perhaps take ownership, sell them for cash, which could be used to help Ukraine in the future.
You know, we've seen the seizing of the yachts, and it'll take a long time to dig through a lot of the dodgy real estate purchases and the like, but there does seem some commitment to make that happen.
There are many, many corporate intermediaries, so that the beneficial owner is extremely difficult to determine. And one way that these task forces are working is to try and break down the barriers of a lot of the privacy requirements that are in place.
The governments of Europe and the US have already seized over a half a dozen yachts worth well over $1 billion. They've frozen their houses, their villas in Lake Como. In the case of Abramovich, they've frozen his financial investments in the US. They're forcing him to sell Chelsea Football Club, which is of course his prestigious football club that he owns.
I want to be clear, I'm not defending any of the oligarchs, but it is not entirely clear how the decisions are being taken as to whose property is being seized in what jurisdiction for what alleged connection to the ongoing atrocities that are taking place in Ukraine.
The goal this time around is, number one, to punish these oligarchs who have become fantastically wealthy from Vladimir Putin's autocracy and the kleptocracy that is today's Russia. But number two, it is also to prevent Vladimir Putin from accessing that capital, from accessing those funds that the oligarchs have provided him for years.
To my mind, the sanctions are designed not so much to get the oligarchs to turn on Putin. That's a big ask. But they do degrade the military capacity of Russia, and they make Russia much more difficult to govern.
In my opinion, the oligarchs are the trustees for Vladimir Putin. They're the ones who hold his money. And so far, we've only sanctioned 20 oligarchs. There's about 118 of them. We should at least be increasing that sanctions list.
We have really strong property right protections, and so it's really hard to impose sanctions that deny someone the benefits of assets that they own. And that's by design. We don't want governments to be able to, on a political whim, come in and say, I don't think that you agree with me on this policy, and therefore I'm going to take away your yacht, your mansion, your company, your bank account, or anything else.
At the very least, this will at least reduce their fortunes. We've seen many of these oligarchs lose up to half of their fortunes since the invasion of Ukraine, and this is just the beginning.